All right, good people, we are back. You should see a familiar face. A good old Meagan Landress. How you doing today, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I love how. So we were just chit chatting, but that was a little bit of radio voice you just gave me right now. I didn't. I don't know if I heard that.
Hey, when the record goes on, so does
That's
my
right.
radio voice.
That's right. That's exactly right. And historically, as you know, we've been able to meet with Megan and learn from her in regards of just how to navigate student loans. It is, I would say, the Achilles heel of this generation, for
Mhm,
sure. But there's also been a lot of moving parts, specifically around the pandemic. And so recently, just like I believe the last time, there was news sent out. Shout out to Megan and her team on sending out emails whenever there was an update. But there was a lot of good information in the update. And I'm like, all right, we got to get this to the people. So
mhm,
as we can see here, we've been able to convene virtually to discuss specifically PSLF, and that is the
mhm,
Public Service Loan Forgiveness Game Plan. So
mhm.
before we get into some of the major announcements, can we just like 30,000 foot overview? This actually may be the first time someone is listening to us talk about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness. Can you just give 30,000 foot overview what it is and how folks and the type of people that need to be thinking about it?
Yes. Yeah. So public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF for short, is for public servants. So folks who are working in a nonprofit, 501(c)(3) designation is usually key there, or a government entity. So federal, state, local, tribal, city. Usually school teachers fall in this bucket pretty easily. Even healthcare professionals fall in this bucket pretty easily because a lot of hospital systems are nonprofit. So this program will forgive one's loans after making 120 qualifying payments. And there's been some adjustments to that, which we'll get into today. But
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, we have to have federal student loans. We have to be working full time as a public servant in one of these entities, and we have to be paying our loans on an income driven plan. And if we do that for 120 payments, whatever balance is left over on that loan will be forgiven, and it's
Mm.
tax-free forgiveness. So that
Okay.
shakes out to be about 10 years if we were completely consistent with payments.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. And of course, just the different groups that were shared. So it may be nurses that you may know. There could be some educators that you may know. Even if you don't know their situation, who their employer is, at least share this information with them so they can start identifying if they fit this type of forgiveness. And then as well, so all right, real quick. So there's a specific type of loan, right?
Hmm.
And that needs to be, then there is a the income payment plan that has to be in alignment. Then there is the type of employment that I have here, and then of course the
Hmm.
number of payments. So would you say those would be the four elements that one can start unpacking?
Yes. Yeah. And full time with employment. So that's
Okay.
kind of like
Mm.
part to that employment side of it. Yeah. So part time does not is not eligible unless you're part time at two different entities that qualify, which I do see happen where someone's part time as in a clinical setting, and then part time in academia, maybe something like
Mm.
that. So that sometimes works out as long as the hours together add up over 30 a week. Then we're eligible between the two different employers. But most people just have one employer,
Right.
and they need to be full time by the employer's definition of full time.
Okay. That's really good to know. Really good to know. And with the type of loan, and these are direct loans. That's the type of loan that they.
They need to be direct loans going
Okay.
forward. Yes.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
waiver that we'll get into addresses if the loan has not been a direct loan historically. But going forward, they need to be a direct loan. And you can change your loan code by doing a consolidation, which
Mm.
is not refinancing. So it's not taking the loan to a private company, but it's combining it within the federal system. Um, and it converts it into a direct consolidation loan, which is then eligible for PSLF.
So can you give a quick example? So let's say we role play, and if let's say you share some of the profile characteristics that would say, all right, I may need to look at consolidating these loans that I have, what would be, let's, if you say, all right, this is the type of employment that they're operating in, you don't have to give an income, but if you could explain the profile of someone that says, I may need to look at consolidating these loans.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think this can be narrowed down pretty easily to someone if you need to figure out if you need to consolidate. So the wrong types of loans were only issued before 2010. So if you are had been borrowing loans for school, undergrad or graduate school before 2010, it's worth taking a look at your loan file to make sure that you have the right loans, because you might have what's called FFEL loans, which stands for Family Federal Education Loans, or Perkins loans, which
Mm.
these two loan types don't exist anymore. They don't issue these loans anymore, but they did a lot before 2010. And so if you borrowed before then, that's maybe a good indicator that you need to look into this, and look into consolidation to correcting that loan code going forward.
Okay, that's good to know. Really good to know. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so the the pandemic has been very interesting,
Mm-hmm.
depending upon what side of the table you sit on, but specifically with the student loans, there's been, I would say, some tootsie rolls and some fist pumps. Like, are you telling me I don't have to make a payment, right? So,
Yeah.
like, can you give an update on how the pandemic impacted the way student loans have been? We'll just say how they've been handled. Those payments have been handled,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the potential benefits for those that have student loans in regards for our audience.
Yeah, so the federal student loans have been on pause due to the COVID pandemic since March of 2020. And what that means for people is that they have not been required to make payments. Their payments were automatically shut off, and they're in this kind of administrative forbearance environment. And they shut down interest. So interest
Hmm.
is now down to 0%. So people pursuing forgiveness, how that's still impactful is these months during the payment freeze count towards forgiveness as if you were making payments, but you're not required to. And so this is saving people lots of money by just not having to make payments to be eligible for the forgiveness. And that's
Hmm.
continuously been extended. Right now, this is going to expire August 31st, 2022. I
Okay.
think there's reason to believe that they'll push it past August 31st into 2023. So there's a long period of time where we're getting free credit towards forgiveness that people can be taking advantage of.
Wow, wow. So March of 2020. So it's
Mhm.
essentially been, 2 years, right?
Yep.
Of not, the pause of the payment,
Yeah.
and then the freezing of the interest, which is a huge benefit. So ultimately, those that may qualify for the forgiveness, that would reflect, I guess, 24 payments as credits that
Hmm.
they would not have to, just assuming if it's in between March of 2020 and March of 2022. And it seems like all the way in through August, they'll be able to include those additional months or credit those additional months as payments, even though they haven't had to make a payment.
Yep. Exactly. So as long as we've been full time in public service, during this environment, then yes, you'll see 24 payments credited right now, maybe 25. Yeah, 25 payments.
Right.
And then, yeah, continuing on into August, we have, almost 2.5 years of free credit.
Mm,
And so this is huge for a lot of people because usually
right.
it's about 10 years of payments. But if we cut it down by a fifth of the time or like a fifth of the cost, it's really saving people a lot of money.
Right. That's exactly right. That's a really, really good point. Is so there's been some transitions with, and I'm thinking about teachers specifically.
Hmm.
So teachers, they may transition out of the school system and say, hey, I'm actually going to work at this, publicly traded company. Things have changed. Do they have to be employed in that area to still apply? Let's say they may have done 8 years. And I'm not too sure, but like, do they have to be employed with that particular entity to still apply for forgiveness, or how does that work in regards to the application process?
The original rules, yes. If we have, let's say we made 120 payments working as a school teacher. but then we quit on the 120th day and we went into a private sector industry.
Right. Right.
Great, you made the 120 payments, but the original rules say that we have to still be employed by that public service entity at the time of forgiveness. And sometimes it takes them a couple months to issue the forgiveness. We're talking about the government here, so it takes a little bit of time. During this waiver period, though, so right now is a unique situation where back in October, they announced this big executive order, and it has loosened the rules on some of the eligibility requirements for PSLF right now. And that same situation, if we were getting loan forgiveness, we made 120 payments today, or like we got to the 120th month.
Right.
We quit our job, we went and applied for forgiveness. We would be able to still get loan forgiveness without having to be employed right there, or there still, up until October 31st, 2022. That's when this waiver expires, to where some of these rules are loosened to where normally we would have had to stay until we got the forgiveness, but during this waiver period, there's a little bit more flexibility there.
Interesting. So let's say, and I'm role playing. So let's say someone was employed for 8 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they made that transition before that 120th payment,
Mm-hmm.
and they see the update and the flexibility. Is there a window for them to say, hey, I'm gonna change my employer and try, is there a window there? I'm trying to think about those that may get caught straddling the fence. Is there a window of opportunity?
In a sense. So let's say you left public service, but and when you do that, then our payments are no longer counting towards this program. We still make, income driven payments, or we can, but they're not counting towards the 120. So if we left with no intentions of ever coming back, we're not going to get the loan forgiveness. If we left, but we end up coming back into public service at some point. So let's say we took a 1-year detour, or a couple year detour, but we find ourselves back in a public service capacity, then we can pick back up where we left off with our payment count before we left. That's always been the case. So if we had 8 years of payment credit, we went private sector for a year, then we come back into public service, then we pick back up with 8 years, and we continue working towards the 120 from there.
Okay. That's good to know. And so also hearing that, it sounds like the duration of your employment and the payments don't have to be consecutive.
Right. Don't have to be consecutive. Don't need to be the same employer.
Okay.
It's really just about the payment count and checking all of those boxes at the same time to get to 120.
Okay. So with this waiver and some of this flexibility, before you get into, you shared part of the update with the going back to October or August.
Mm-hmm.
How does one check their situation? I think I may have sped past the initial question of, all right, where does one go up? What website do they go into? How does one say, okay, what do I have? What's going on?
Yep.
Help me out with that.
Best place to go would be studentaid.gov, which is the Department of Education's kind of hub for all things federal student loans. So you can log in, or if you haven't logged in a while, you can reset your account. It'll pull up a list of your loans, and it'll tell you exactly what you have. And if you're curious about your employer being eligible, you can go through. They have a PSLF help tool within studentaid.gov that you could type in their EIN number, which you could just grab from your W-2 that you just got. Right. And it'll tell you right off the bat if that employer is eligible or not. And it also does a good job of kind of taking you through. It'll identify the eligibility requirements, and it'll identify if it looks like you have the wrong loans. So that can be a helpful tool if you're just lost and you need a place to start. Is go to studentaid.gov, look at the PSLF help tool, and that can get you going in the right direction. Okay,
perfect. Hopefully everyone was able to knock that down, get that written down, and of course visit the website. I know that student loans can be a bit, it could paralyze you from making some steps, but this information that we're hearing now, I'm hopeful that we will get feedback from our audience of those that say, hey, this was very helpful, and now I don't have to make X amount of payments. So this is very, very good. So yesterday we got an email that says there was
Mm-hmm.
a huge announcement, and part of that was and I'm leaning on this email to guide this part of our conversation because this is where the expert continues to shine. Um,
Right.
so there is the ending of the forbearance steering. Tell us
Hmm.
what that is, and how this is beneficial for those that may apply for the PSLF.
Yep. Yeah. This interestingly is about not just PSLF folks, but anybody who's on an income driven plan. And
Okay.
in some of our previous videos, we've talked about how there's public service loan forgiveness for those working in public service. But there's also the income driven loan forgiveness. So if we're just on the income driven plan, we're in private sector, but we pay on that income driven plan for either 20 or 25 years, depends on the plan that you're on, then whatever balance is left over at the end of that time frame is forgiven as well without requirements of like employer or industry, like working within a certain industry. So that's another forgiveness opportunity.
That's a
And
big deal.
the huge updates that came out a couple of days ago from Congress was there's been two big problems. Really, just kind of if you boil it down, there's been two big problems with loan forgiveness in the student loan system. One has been so I'll kind of boil it down to maybe, I don't want to say miscommunication because I don't know if
Mm.
that's the right word, but just
Right.
servicers not being helpful. I will say that. I think
That
that's
is
kind of what it comes out to.
that is, ladies and gentlemen, she was very nice on how she
Right.
articulated that. So I appreciate it. So that's a great way
Yep.
of positioning that.
So servicers are contractors that the Department of Education hires to manage your loans because they're owned by the government, but your government officials are not going to be managing them. They hire a company to do that for them. And so the servicer is who connects with you on payments and loan management and tracks those payments and helps you, answer questions, things like that.
Right.
Historically, the servicers have been horrendous at this. I'll just say
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
And so that's a big reason for this PSLF waiver, because I think a lot of people were unaware of the technicalities of being eligible, like having
Right.
to have the right loans or having to be on the right repayment plan. The
Right.
waiver is fixing that historically. So now people who maybe had ineligible payments because of those reasons can now go back and get credit for those payments towards PSLF. So that's been really huge.
Wow.
So what was
Hmm.
announced the other day was that they're making two big or taking two big steps. The Department of Education is taking two big steps to continue to kind of right some wrongs that have happened. And one other wrong, I guess, underneath the servicer's umbrella is that historically they have been steering people into forbearance instead of offering information about income-driven plans or
Mm.
helping navigate repayment. Forbearance, what that means is they put you into a loan status that does not require you to make payments. And if someone's calling because they can't afford their payments, or they're confused about their options and they get thrown into forbearance, that's a really quick and easy thing for the servicer to do to get you off the phone. And
Mm.
what disservice it does to people is income driven plans are designed to be based off of your income and help make the payment affordable. And if
Right.
they don't take the time to explain how, or like get that calculated for you to know like what that payment would be, and they just shove you into forbearance, then those forbearance months don't count towards forgiveness of any kind. And
Mm.
so we lose out on time, unfortunately,
Right.
and interest accrues when we're in forbearance. So if and this is also relevant to people who were not, well, it's relevant to anyone who's been on an income driven plan, because forbearance
Right.
just it halts forgiveness overall. And so the right that they're correct, or the wrong that they're correcting. I mean, one announcement yesterday or the other day was that they're going to go back and now count certain extended forbearance periods, where if someone was in forbearance for over a year or the cumulative of 36 months, which is the max that someone can be in forbearance for, they're going to give people credit for that time frame towards forgiveness. And
Mm,
that's really huge. And they're
right.
being not picky about it either. I think they're going to go back through. We're still waiting on some clarifying details here, but who this is relevant to is if you are someone who, put your loans into forbearance right after school or for an
Right.
extended period of time at any point during your loan period or loan repayment, and we lost out on forgiveness time because of that, either because we didn't know that that's what would happen, or we were in a rough financial spot, or the servicer just pushed us into forbearance, then it's we're potentially going to have more credit towards forgiveness. So that
Mm,
was really huge.
yeah.
But does that make sense how I explained that?
That makes a ton of sense, and I'm thinking about. I remember even prior to the pandemic, we've had clients that ran into financial issues, and they were speaking with we'll just say the company that starts with an N.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was that pushed them to their decision was they were like, "Yo, just go into forbearance," right?
Yeah.
And the clients I'm thinking about are clients that would actually qualify for PSLF,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the um, trust that has been impressed upon these agencies and these servicing entities, you feel like they got your best interests in mind, right? And so I think
Mm-hmm.
this is a really good wrong that they're righting, especially if you know that gone into forbearance at some point, and you need to get a second opinion on, all right, how does should have this been corrected. So when you say they are going to, and I know more news is going to come out, is it like partial, like, hey, we're going to do X amount, or is it kind of like dollar for dollar?
To be determined. I think
Yeah.
there's a level. What they're looking for is the time amount
Yeah.
spent, and we're not going to have to pay for this credit. It's just going to be given to us for those time periods. So they're basically, their announcement said that they're going to be going through doing this one time like overhaul, basically of repayment
Mm,
history, and they're going to be giving people credit for these extended forbearance timeframes. And we're going to start seeing that towards the end of this year and early 2023. And
okay.
this brings me to the second big announcement yesterday,
Okay.
which another huge problem we've had. So, first was servicers in general, just not being helpful with repayment, pushing
Right.
us into forbearance, or not helping with PSLF, for example,
Right.
which that was addressed back in October. The second thing is not knowing where you are in forgiveness.
Mm,
Like, how far are you towards the 20 or 25-year timeline to forgiveness? Or how far are you towards PSLF? So they've already done what's called a PSLF payment tracker, which helps people who are pursuing PSLF to know and identify how close they are to forgiveness and what months counted and what months didn't. So that was a great update. That was back in, I think, 2020, I want to say, maybe
okay.
2019. But
That's
there was
good.
no way to figure out how far you were in the income driven forgiveness, no easy way. And
Right.
so they're going to be implementing a tracking process for the income driven plans as well, that's more transparent and that's more real time, so people know how far they are along with that as well. And that's going to roll out, sounds like early 2023, which I am stoked about. I think that's going to bring so much clarity to people.
Right, right. Wow. Quick history question. When did they establish the PSLF in the IDR um
Mhm.
opportunities? When did that, what year was that?
PSLF started October 2007, and income driven has been around for a while. The first plan was in the 90s. It was called income
Yeah.
contingent repayment. Then income based repayment came about in, I think, 2009, maybe a little sooner. And then pay came about in
Mm,
2016, and repay came about, no, pay came about in 2014, repay was 2016. So
okay.
these different income driven plans have come out at different times, which also makes student loan repayment very confusing because you're trying to figure out which income driven plan to go on. That's a whole other conversation, but yeah. So they're not brand new though. So
Right,
that's what's kind of frustrating is they're not brand new. People have credit towards these forgiveness timelines, and there's just been no way to track it historically, which has been
right.
difficult for people to plan off of and to feel
Yeah,
confident in their plan, you know?
that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. And the government, did they make a change with the service providers over the last couple of years? Like, was there a shift there?
Hmm. Yep. And so some of the things that have already happened in the past couple of years. Granite State was one servicer that stepped down, and their accounts got moved over to other servicers. Another big one was Navient, who may have
Oh,
been that ugly word you were talking about earlier. Navient. They were the most, I think, disliked servicer and probably the
yep,
worst. I mean,
yep,
they're all there's a low bar there, but
yep, yep.
um so they
Okay,
stepped down already. Fed loan servicing is next. They're stepping down at the end of this year. So the big like jumbo companies that are still managing and servicing student loans, one is Mohila. So Mohila is who's responsible for PSLF going forward.
okay,
FedLoan is still processing PSLF paperwork, but Mohila will be taking over in 2023.
hmm,
Then there's Nelnet. That's another big one. Great Lakes is
yep,
another big servicer. And then there's a few other smaller ones like Ed Financial. There's, let's see, trying to remember the others. I think that's about it. I'm probably missing
yeah.
one, but those are the jumbo ones that you would know about.
Okay. And with the change, so if someone had a Navient, or Navient was their service provider, they are sending out notifications on, hey, this is your new service provider. Is that
Mhm.
something they have to go online and find? So, or just be on the lookout via mail?
Yeah, mail or email, they are getting
Okay.
notices. So this is why it's really important to have your contact information updated in studentaid.gov because they rely on that contact info to give you updates on where your loans are and who's holding them and what you need to be doing with your loans.
Every time you always drop so much free jewelry. That is so good.
Free
So
jewelry. I like that.
that is so good to know. So one of the things, and this is a really an asterisk question, and we see this all throughout the country with the shortages around for the teachers, and some of that is could be income based, but also some of that is like, hey, I don't know if I want to have that income considering the amount of loans that I have to pay off, right? And so
Mm,
in order for their income to increase, they need more school, right? So you want more money, all right, we're going to need a master's degree. You want this,
mhm.
and so do you see this posturing of the government specifically around the PSLF as a potential recruitment tool for more teachers to come into the workforce, or what's your thoughts around that?
It's a good question. I think I think there's a lot of focus on the symptom of this whole student loan issue, and student loans are the symptom of a bigger problem. And the
Yeah,
bigger problem is cost of attendance, cost of going to school. And we've talked a lot
yeah,
about this, I know, even
right,
offline.
right,
But I think this is to reverse the narrative about how this program was designed to work because it was designed to be a benefit to public servants because public servants they are public servants.
right, right.
They don't usually make as much as maybe someone in private sector would make income wise
Yep,
in the same profession. Teachers, I know it's sometimes kind of hard to go privately, as a teacher,
right.
but attorneys are a great example of this. So attorneys working at the DA or as a DA or working in a government or nonprofit setting, their income potential is a lot lower than
Yep,
and a lot it's not going to grow as fast. There's not a lot of upward movement as there would be in a private practice or a
yeah,
big law firm, for example. Lifestyles are different.
yep.
Government work is more 9 to 5, like you shut off your computer, you go home. I know there are some positions that may still not be like that,
Right.
but pay discrepancy is there, but an attorney who goes to the same exact school, sitting next to like the same classmate in every class, borrowing the same amount of loans, there's less ability of that lower income person to be able to pay off the loans at the same rate that someone in big law could pay them off at.
Right.
So
Right.
public service loan forgiveness was an incentive to still go get that higher ed degree, still further your career with education, but be able to commit to public service and not have their loans kind of dictate that decision.
That's
And
good.
yeah, so I think in a sense, yes, maybe that's but I think they're honestly just trying to um, get the
Yeah.
reputation back for the program because so many people lost hope or faith in it.
Right.
I got on the phone with many people who were completely eligible for the program, but had totally lost faith in it and decided they were going to pay it off instead.
Right.
Um, which doesn't have to be the case. I think fear does a lot of really, you know, sad things. It
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
to
That's
your
right.
financial situation.
Right.
And so I understand why people are, scared of the program. And I think this is trying to help reverse the narrative of it.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And another reason why we need you, because as you mentioned, the fear, and you combine that with the misinformation, right? So folks are seeing
Yeah.
the Forbes article and like, man,
Oh, yeah.
98%, right? And so there's information out there that could have triggered some of their emotions. And so as long as you can get proximate to a professional, pay for a professional, and make sure that you have a clear understanding of your situation and also the opportunities. That's why we're super grateful to tap into you, and allow you to drop so much free jewelry today during our call.
Yeah.
Well, this is very helpful. As always, I always want to make sure that our audience has a chance to connect with you. So if you do
Mhm.
have student loans, and let's say you work in the public sector, you may be an educator, you may be a district attorney, whatever it may be. You're like, look, I need someone to look at my situation specifically, and I would
Mhm.
like to speak with Meagan. What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So my website is financialcoachmegan.com. We could set up an introduction call to make sure that your situation is something I can help with. Usually, any student loan situation is something I can help with. There's some oddball things that maybe not. Maybe I'd refer you to like a student loan attorney, but when it comes to repayment, I'm your girl. So you could find me there, and then of course, chat with Isaac. He'll connect us too. We'll yeah, and I'm
That's
I'm
right.
always happy to be like the student loan plan. Oops, my earbud fell out. But always happy to be the student loan planning component to the
Mhm.
financial plan that you would build for your clients too. So I'll
Definitely.
be that expert in that one area that no one likes to talk about.
Yeah, and you do a great job. You do a great job, and I think
Thank you.
and for our audience that may be listening, financialcoachmegan.com, and Megan is spelled Meagan dot
Hmm.
com. So make sure you type that in and say, man, I didn't even know. You should find it now, and so or
There
just
you go.
Google it. It'll definitely pop up, or send us a note. Any lasting comments before we head on out and get to the rest of our day? Any thoughts, comments, or don't pay for your student loans with Bitcoin? Anything? What you got?
Right. Yeah, gosh. Last comment I'll say is just, I know the student loans in general are very overwhelming. And even this conversation still like maybe as approachable as I might think it was might still be overwhelming for you. And that's okay. But I think avoiding looking at your loan situation or avoiding making sure that you're on the right track,
Mm,
it can only lead in negative things. It's only going
right,
to cost us more time, cost us
right.
mental energy because we're not thinking about it, or we're continuing, to kick the can down the road. It can cost us a lot of opportunity because there are a lot of really positive changes going on right now in the student loan system that expire. So if we're not taking
Mm,
advantage of those opportunities right now before October 31st, we might be missing out on opportunities. So as hard as it is, I think, looking this straight in the face and tackling it head on, I promise you, I really do. Like almost every single scenario that someone that I've worked with, someone walks into the situation thinking that having some kind of idea of what their student loan situation is going to look like and what the result is going to be. After we do a plan, it's not as bad as they seem or as they thought. And
Right,
so I
right,
think the unknown is what's so scary. And so you just have
right.
to push past that, just rip the band-aid off. Call me if you need to. Call Isaac.
That's right. That's
And
right.
get this behind you, because once you have a
Right.
plan, then you don't have to think about it anymore. You just have to
That's right.
maintain it. You
That's
just
right.
gotta
That's right.
look at the plan now, and it'll be on its way. So that's
That's
the last
that's
parting
so
advice
good.
I'll give.
So strong. That's strong. And as you mentioned, the fact that there is an expiration date on some of this
Mhm,
flexibility. So for those that are like, all right, I've been deferring these student loans. I've been kicking it down the road. It's time to pick up the can, right? And so like just pick it up for these next couple of months and just
mhm,
have a concentrated effort and a goal to say, worst case scenario, I have a better understanding of my situation. There is nothing wrong with that, right? And so
mhm,
one of the things that even for myself, anything that I typically worry about, I need to get closer to, right? Like something that typically causes me some anxiety or trepidation, some type of whatever it may be. That means I either need to get closer to it because there is that unknown in the distance that I need to get more clarity on. And then
mhm.
typically once you get closer to, you're like, you know what, it's not that bad.
Right.
So so
Yeah.
really, really good feedback there. Well, Megan, of course, thank you for joining us today.
Mhm.
This is really good, and 9 times out of 10, we'll be calling you again to get you back on. Um, and
Sounds
uh,
good.
and as I'm thinking about it, we may do something to where we may do a live. We may schedule a date. So y'all are hearing it first. We may
Mhm,
schedule a date and invite like teacher, a lawyer, right? And just let them
mhm,
have like a Q&A live, something like that. Let me know and I'll get your
mhm.
fee as well. That's
Yeah.
that's a lot of fluctuating.
No, that would be
Uh,
fun.
and we'll just kind of, navigate their situation real time and see how that could be beneficial.
Mhm. Yeah, that sounds good. Well, thanks for having me, and hopefully, anybody listening picked up one little thing that they can take on to better their situation, and
That's
that's all
right.
we can hope for.
That's right. That's right. That's right. All right, good people. As you know, happy whatever day it is when you're listening to this, and make sure you stay planning.